In 2007, a nursing home cat named Oscar did something no one could explain. He would walk into a patient's room, curl up beside them, and within hours, that patient would pass away. He did this over 25 times. Was Oscar predicting death? Or was something else going on? Oscar lived in a dementia care unit in Rhode Island. Staff started noticing a pattern. Oscar ignored most patients completely. But every so often, he'd pick one. Sit with them. Refuse to leave. Nurses got so used to it that Oscar's presence became a warning sign. If Oscar showed up, they'd call the family. Doctors were baffled. This wasn't a coincidence anymore, the pattern was too consistent to ignore. So what was Oscar actually detecting? The leading theory isn't mystical at all. It smells. When the body starts shutting down, cells release chemical compounds as a byproduct of dying tissue. Some researchers believe Oscar could detect these compounds, essentially smelling the early stages of organ failure before humans could see any visible signs. Cats have around 200 million scent receptors. Dogs have even more, up to 300 million, compared to a human's measly 5 million. That's not a small gap. That's an entirely different sensory world. Dogs have already been trained to detect cancer, seizures, and even COVID through scent alone, with accuracy rates rivaling medical tests. So Oscar may not have been predicting death. He may have simply been smelling it before we could. But not everyone buys the smell theory completely. Skeptics point out something simpler. Oscar may have just been drawn to stillness and warmth. Dying patients are often kept undisturbed, wrapped in warm blankets, in quiet rooms, exactly the environment a cat naturally seeks out. In other words, Oscar wasn't predicting death. He was just being a cat, and death happened to follow. It's a classic case of correlation versus causation. Oscar visited quiet, warm rooms. Quiet, warm rooms happened to be where dying patients were placed. The two got linked, but that doesn't prove Oscar understood what was happening. Oscar isn't alone. Similar behavior shows up across the animal kingdom. Elephants are famous for what researchers call grieving rituals. They've been observed standing silently over the bones of dead herd members, touching skulls gently with their trunks, sometimes returning to the same remains years later. Dogs have refused to leave the bodies of deceased owners for days, even after being offered food elsewhere. And honeybees, this one's wild, will physically remove and quarantine dead or dying bees from the hive to prevent disease from spreading. It's not emotional. It's pure biological instinct. So the behaviors range from what looks like grief to cold, mechanical survival instinct. Which raises the real question of this video. Is any of this actually sensing death, or are we just projecting human meaning onto animal behavior? Most researchers agree on one thing: animals aren't understanding death the way humans do. They don't have a concept of mortality, or an afterlife, or grief in the philosophical sense. What they likely have is a highly tuned response to physical signals, smell, temperature, stillness, sound. Signals that, to them, simply mean something is different here. We interpret that as sensing death because we're pattern-seeking creatures. We want animals like Oscar to be mystical and knowing, because it makes the story better. But the more likely explanation? Animals are just better at reading the raw physical world than we are. We're the ones adding meaning to it afterward. Oscar the cat passed away in 2022, after more than a decade of quietly sitting beside the dying. Whether he understood what he was doing or not, he gave a lot of families a few final hours to say goodbye. Maybe that's the real answer. Animals don't need to understand death to help us face it.